In this recording, I want to show you how we actually do some specific coding. In the other video that's linked to this series, I showed you how to import the data set, and I gave you some basics about the coding, but here I want to actually show you some coding. So on the right here, I have the code sheet for this data set. And I split my screen so to make it easier for me to do what I need to do. We have one variable called sex, which represents participant biological sex, and this one's already coded. So you'll notice this variable is a discrete variable, and it's a discrete nominal variable. So it has two different levels. Female equals 1, male equals 0. So I had to make sure that it was coded correctly when I imported the data set. I used three different lines of code for this. The first line is the variable label. So the label, according to this code sheet, is participant biological sex. So I want to make sure this is the same, right? Notice how it's within these single quotation marks. You could use double quotation marks as long as you're consistent. So you have variable label, sex, participant biological sex within these quotation marks, then period. That's the end of that line. The next line gives the value labels. These are the labels that are associated with the different values 0 and 1. So 0 is male, 1 is female. We see that right here. 0 is male, 1 is female. The next line is variable level. So this is telling us what kind of variable it is. Is it nominal, scale, or ordinal? Well, according to this, it's a nominal variable, right? So we have sex is nominal. So we have those three lines of code for sex. I'm going to do one more for you, and then I want you to watch me do this, and then you should be able to replicate what I do. So let's take this variable here called lunch. All right, so let's start by giving it a label, variable. Now, you'll notice it doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes there's some quirkiness to SPSS, and it won't show up when you start typing. Now, I don't have any data sets open, so no variable will pop up as far as I know, unless something weird is going on. But sometimes if you have a data set open, lunch would pop up, but it doesn't, so you don't have a data set open. And the variable label that I'm giving to lunch is, do you get free or low-cost lunch at school? So in quotation marks, do you get free or low cost lunch at school? And there you go. I put a period at the end there. But look, let me remove the period, and you'll see that the next line is no longer in blue, because it's considering this as a continuation of the prior line. Once I put the period here, I separate the two. The next thing I need is the value labels. Pops up, and you have to put the variable name again, lunch. And we know 0 is, well, let's see what's 0. According to this, let's take a look at this bad boy here. 0 is no and 1 is yes. Usually that's the case. 0 is no, and 1 is yes. So you notice that I had to put the number, right? And then the label. And then again the period at the end. And I did my quotation marks. If you miss any of these things, it won't work. You can't miss a quotation mark, you can't miss the period, you can't miss anything. Finally, I have variable level. So a lot of things pop up here. I go variable level. And for lunch, by the way, it doesn't have to be capital L. It will work if it's a lowercase l in this case. In parentheses, I put nominal, and it pops up. Okay, and that's it. So that's done. Now, I'll show you one of these scale variables. There's these questions, who are your friends, etc. It's an interesting variable. And notice that we don't have any value labels for scale variables, and we'll talk more about that when we get into continuous variables, but these aren't discrete variables. I mean, you could imagine them as being discrete variables, but they're not. They're integers, but in this case, let's assume that they're not discrete variables. Okay, so no 1 is the first variable I'm working with. Well, here's an example of a scale variable, age. Person's age is on a continuum. So we give it a variable label, participant age at baseline, and we assign its level as scale. But there, you notice there is no value labels line. So when there's a scale variable, there's only 2 lines of code. So let's add no1. Again, we go variable labels no1. It sounds like I'm saying no one, but I'm not. Who are your friends? Period. And variable level. No1, and it's a scale variable. So notice when I start typing, it just pops up. That's really cool. That's it. Now the last type of variable, I'm not going to do one of these because this is a little more long. It's longer, but here's the thing. It's the same basically as the nominal, but when we have an ordinal variable, we just have multiple levels. So you'll notice, like here in this case, alcohol 1, right, has an underscore here because we don't allow spaces in SPSS for writing variable names. And then I gave it its label. It's a long label. It has all these different levels that we had to give labels to, right? Value labels to. Like 1 is 0 days. Everything's got to be in quotation marks. And it's an ordinal variable. This is an important point. When we downloaded the data set from Excel, whatever you wrote the variable name as, it's got to match with what it says here. So when I did my code, I made sure the sex was sex, right? If you did something like sex_1, for some reason, this won't work. This code will not work. It has to match exactly, word for word. The same thing with the data sets. When you have a data set, I've noticed some people, when I ask you to name your data set 1, they'll do data set 1 without a space. Then, of course, the program won't work. Everything has to match perfectly. All right? So that's a little bit about coding. So this should fill in any gaps that I left off in the last video. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.